Well, hello and welcome to what is an emergency podcast. We shone the beacon into the sky, and the the contributors came running. They saw the sign in the clouds
From the Batcave.
Who am I then? Who am I?
Batman, woman, person,
Bad
bat person. But you, from your bat cave, you saw it in the woods of North London. You saw it shine on the sky, and the government have put, the Home Office have put out a consultation in relation to defining child-to-parent abuse, which even in itself sounds a bit weird. And I thought it'd be really good to kind of rally the troops, anyone who's got any sort of vested interest in this world, to come and join in that consultation and to fill themselves in. But I thought it'd be really interesting to get a bit of a perspective on the consultation. So, hello, Scott, how are you?
I'm good. How are you, Al?
Excellent. I'm really well.
I'm not the one that's answered the call, by the way. I'm just here because I have to be. So
you are Robin. You're Alfred. Alfred.
When I was little, I always wanted to be Robin. I think I want to be Robin, and Scott can be Batman.
Right.
Not so sure about that, Helen.
I'll be Alfred then.
Yeah.
And well, hello, Helen.
Hello.
How are you?
It's nice to be back with you after a while. It's been a while since we spoke, chatted.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and you may be the most prevalent guest of all.
I get loyalty points.
Yeah.
Can I collect them for a mug at the end of the year?
Oh, there's plenty of mugs around here. Don't worry about that.
We have got mugs, actually.
We do have mugs. Actually, I think you're on our third ever podcast in 2016.
I'm looking. Keep chatting. I'm looking. I do this every time we get somebody come back on.
Cool. Anyway, Helen, you were quite clear about your conditions for coming on, and one was that we were finished early so you could go and watch the TV, which shows absolute dedication to the cause, which I admire you for your honesty. But it's true. Helen, could you give us a little, maybe say what you've been up to in the last few weeks, months, years, because you are always tinkering away in this world of violence and aggression in children's behaviour in families and homes. Tell us what the word is on the street, what you've been tinkering on with, and let's then have a quick look at the Home Office plan.
Where to start?
Yeah, beginning.
That doesn't really match up with what you told me you wanted to say. Also, you've already thrown me into confusion here.
He does this all the time.
I'm sorry.
So I started thinking about this in 2005 onwards, really. So that's how long I've been around. And from 2011 was when I started my website. So it's been a long time that we've been thinking about this issue, that I've been thinking about this issue. And in that time, I've been banging on and networking like mad and blagging free places at conferences and blagging free books and generally trying to connect people, because I think that the heart of this is that people have got to be talking to each other and people have got to be working together. And so that's been one of the key things that I've been trying to do to enable people to speak to each other and to listen to each other. So when I started working on this, we were calling it parent abuse. That's what I was calling it when I started looking at it in 2004. And I quickly found that when I talked to friends or even to other social workers, people were saying, "Oh, so you mean parents abusing their children?"
Yeah.
And people weren't hearing, or people weren't and that's part of that is because it's if you've not come across it, it kind of blows your mind as well, that this might be a thing. And so quickly I started using different terminology, but I also found that people were starting to use different terminology and were trying to find a way that described succinctly the different parties, if you like, the direction of what was going on and what it might be. So for a long time, I was using the expression child-to-parent violence and abuse. But that kind of misses the point that early on, the sense was that this was really something that adolescents, 12-year-olds upwards, were engaging in. That it was, just as it was quite difficult to think about as an issue at all, where people were coming across it mostly was with adolescents, whether that was in terms of the criminal justice scene or families generally, youth workers, whoever, children on the edge of care. It was seen very much as something that adolescents were doing, and that there was key ages when it got worse or better. And so we were talking about adolescent to parent, and people were saying perhaps violence and abuse, because there'd been even early on, there was an argument about, was it violence, was it abuse, was all violence abusive, was all abuse violent? And in that sort of field, the easiest thing is to say, okay, we'll say both then. We'll say both, and then we cover all of the bases. And then I was coming out of a piece of research which was based in Brighton. There was some money left over, and it went towards the people doing the research persuaded the Home Office that we should publish a guide for practitioners across the field. And so that's how the Home Office Adolescent to Parent Violence and Abuse Guide came out in 2015. So we were working on that for 2 years before it came out. And the other people that were working on it were people that were involved in the research. And then also we brought in different, when I say we, because I'd already blagged my way onto this group at this point.
Well done.
We were bringing in people that had specialist knowledge in different fields, so whether that was housing or the police or whatever, in order to write the specific guidance for those areas. Almost as soon as it was published, people started saying, yeah, this is great, but actually we're getting referrals for 10-year-olds, for 8-year-olds, for 4-year-olds. And we'd already had by 2015, because that was already post beyond the adoption order. All those things were coming out around that time, around 2010 onwards. For about 5 years, there was reports coming out from lots of different fields saying this is happening all over the place. It's not confined to one particular field. And so we were aware that there was different age groups involved, and we were starting the debate about what are we going to call this properly. Are we going to call it violence and abuse? Are we going to call it something else? And Al, you and Wendy were very influential in kind of raising that about it doesn't feel comfortable from an adopter's point of view talking about violence and abuse. We want to talk about something else. We want to be looking at, where's this behavior coming from? Is it one thing? Is it several things? Simultaneously, Yvonne Newbold was working with young people who had learning disabilities, and she was calling it violent challenging behavior, because that was what she was experiencing. It was very violent what she was experiencing, and she found it very challenging, and that's how she chose to term it. So when I was talking to different people working in the field, I was finding that almost everybody, because there was no one agreed way of describing it, almost everybody had their own title for it. And if you could go from borough to borough, you could go from agency to agency, and everybody had a slightly different name and a slightly different set of initials, which is complicated if everybody over the whole country is talking about something different. And it's complicated for a number of reasons. And one of those is that you have to double check each time that you're talking about the same thing. If the title you're using is slightly different, you have to say, can we just confirm who we're talking about, what age group, who are the parties involved in this, what sorts of behavior we're talking about. And so there was that. Then there was the issue that lots of researchers were saying, I've been looking at the data, but this data is really complicated because every single study that's been done is asking different questions and is defining it differently. So we can't ever compare like with like. And that was about looking at research, and that was also about on the ground trying to map, was this increasing year on year in a particular police area, authority, let's say, because there was no agreed way of either calling it or defining it. We never knew if we were counting the same things. And so a group of people started saying, we really, really need to have across the country one agreed way of what we're going to call this, and acknowledging that this is going to be problematic because there are so many different groups of people. We'd kind of had a discussion, is this one thing or is it many things? We'd looked at the fact that this is There are many different drivers, if you like, or vulnerabilities or routes into this, but that it may feel the same wherever it's coming from, and the experience may be very similar wherever it's coming from. And in some countries, lots of countries, there is an agreed name. In Australia, they talk about adolescent violence in the home. In Spain, they've got a particular name which has eluded me because I am getting old. I'm going to call it VCP, which is VFP. VFP, I think they call it. It's violence and it's in Spanish, so I can't do it.
That's fair enough. We'll cut you some slack. It's late on a Wednesday night.
Yeah, VFP. So we were in this country, different people who were writing research papers, or academics particularly, but also practitioners, were saying we would like to have an agreed name and we'd like to have an agreed definition because of those things, because we want to be able to be sure that we're researching the same thing. We want to be able to count it properly in order to, if you can't count something, it's very difficult to commission services because you can't prove that it's needed. But also we want to have a situation where if a parent is experiencing something, they are enabled to give it a voice, a name, and in order for their voice to be heard. And so when they say to someone, I'm experiencing this, the other person hearing them also knows what they're talking about. And we don't have that ridiculous dance where somebody is using the wrong terminology, the wrong jargon, the wrong words. And so people are mishearing each other and offering the wrong solutions and things that are not just not helping, but are potentially making things worse. Or parents are feeling completely disregarded, dismissed, and not helped. So there were lots and lots of reasons why we would like to have had an agreement about what we were calling it. And we've kind of reached a stage where people were saying, we can't move on. We can't do anything unless we have this. But obviously that's an unreal situation. You can't say, right, we're sitting down, we're going to cross our arms and we're going to sit on the ground because the work has to go on. So clearly
nobody gets any help until we can decide.
We're sitting in the middle of the road. No one can come past.
Turn the phones off.
Oh, that's a bit.
I tell you.
So obviously
orange powder everywhere.
Absolutely. So obviously stuff was going on, but we've been plugging away for this for a long time. And in fact, I'm trying to think now how long ago it was. It's going to be before lockdown, which is about 100 years, isn't it?
Yeah.
I'm even going to say maybe 2018 now, because I can't remember exactly. But there was some point when I went along to a meeting at the Home Office where there was a working party set up to look at this, to rewrite the guidance document, and part of that was going to be to come up with an agreed terminology and agreed definition. And then COVID happened, but also there's changes of staff. The civil servants change so often. But what was interesting was that the little working group that was set up was kind of part of a much bigger group. It was very much, not quite one man and a dog, but it was seen as part of something much bigger. And in the end, the much bigger gets the funding and the time, and someone leaves, and so it gets forgotten. And so since that time, what's happened is that it's been passed over to another team in the Home Office, and they've done a little bit of work. And then they've decided, actually, this is much bigger than us. We need to have a much more distinct team working on this that isn't part of something else. So they set up another team and then another team. And so each time I've spoken to the new team and said, this is what we want, this is the reasons why we want it, this is what the thinking is. And so it's been really exciting. So, I'm trying to hold it in here, but it is, I just feel like to have reached this point, I can't quite believe it when we've got the consultation out now. And then it's the consultation, isn't it? It's not we have to say, okay, we haven't actually reached an agreed definition and agreed terminology. We're at the consultation stage, but that's in itself felt as if it was never going to arrive.
Yeah.
And so, and I think it is really, really important that it's not just something that Home Office says, this is what we're going to call it, but that those of us that are working or are researching on, most importantly, the families that are experiencing this, get to have a say in how we think about this.
Yeah.
and what it includes and what we're going to call it. And we're not going to please everybody. There's going to be still people at the end of the day who think, this isn't what I wanted. This doesn't agree with what I think. And sadly, we're just going to have to say, well, you came to the consultation, but the majority decided this, or this is what was agreed in the end.
But in those circumstances, surely, like, if there's a common name for it and you've taken part in this consultation, you're going to know what that name is. So whilst you might have a preference over what you might call it, if you were looking for services or for support or for signposting or whatever, you would say, or more, it's officially known as this.
Yeah.
Maybe, I don't know. I mean, that's what I would do.
Yeah. I think we're going to have to just swallow that. But there's another bit of me that is, the other side of this, of course, is that we're choosing this in what year are we in? 23, 20. I told you I'm getting old. 23, 24 when the consultation ends. And we're all going to be, we're not writing checks anymore, are we, to get that wrong? But we're going to be writing the date down wrong forever, aren't we? And now I can't remember how that sentence starts. I know. But language changes, doesn't we? Over time, we use certain words to describe certain things, and then they become outdated, offensive. Even we change the I can remember. We no longer talk about people being handicapped. We no longer talk about lunatics. We no longer talk about all those sorts of words. We've chosen new terminology, but the terminology we're using now will become outdated, and we will inevitably move on to something else. So what we're choosing now in 2024 in itself will at some point in the future change again, and I can live with that. Because actually, if what we're saying is part of this is about families being able to say, this is what I'm experiencing, and professionals saying, I hear you, okay, we can help, this is what we're going to do. That meeting of minds and that agreeing of terms is the most important bit. So that's where we are, but we really need people to fill in the consultation. When I say we, I was going to ask you about that, actually. Well, first of all, you've been on 3 episodes, and it's every 3 years apart from this one, because this isn't your third. So November 7th, 2016, October 5th, 2019, and then February the 10th, 2022. There you go. So this is your 4th time. You may well be. But this is an emergency one, Scott.
Well,
it's not a real one.
True. It's not a real one.
Yeah, it doesn't really count.
So I was going to ask you about the people that can contribute to that. I mean, I'm guessing that anybody can. Even people who may have been children or young people who have been a part of this. I'm trying to think how to word that without offending them. But people who may have been affected by it when they were children or young people, they can actually contribute to it as well, I'm guessing.
Absolutely. And the guidance, the document, which you can look at quite easily online, is very short to read. It's very straightforward, and it asks very specifically. They want to hear from those that are working in the field in whatever capacity, but particularly from those and we all use the term lived experience. So whether that's parents or whether that's the young people themselves, they want everybody to be able to contribute to the document, the consultation. And the consultation isn't a long consultation. It catches you out because you think, I'll write that in a minute. And then you come to the end and it's like, thank you for completing this. If people are doing it, I would really say, take the time to fill in your answers really as fully as you like when you're doing it. And if you end up repeating yourself, that really doesn't matter. But don't find you've come to the end and there's something you wish you'd said when you haven't had a chance. So,
I think it's only 3 pages, isn't there?
It's only 3 pages,
yeah.
And it asks about the terminology that we want to use. Is this comfortable for you? Is it comfortable to say parent? Is it comfortable to use child? Or do you want to suggest it? Have you got different terminology that you want to use? And then it asks a little bit about the types of behavior that should be included in the definition, and what if they list some and they ask if there's others that should be included. And then it asks for your reasons. If you say yes or no, it'll say, well, can you expand on that and say why your view is like that? So, and do you want something to be short and pithy, or do you want it to be a bit longer? So there's plenty of space there for you to write free text, but it's also tick this box now, move on to the next question. So it shouldn't take very long to answer, but it really, the more people that answer, the more valuable an exercise it will be.
Absolutely,
definitely.
And I was going to ask you, with all these delays from the time. Sorry, Al, you're not really getting to say much tonight, are you? What a shame.
I'll fix it in the edit. Don't worry. I'll fix it in the edit.
And I've forgotten what my question was there. Wait a minute.
While you're thinking about that.
Yeah, I know. I'm going to have to think about that now. Damn, I put myself off.
I was looking, I think it's fascinating. The whole thing is fascinating and it's really exciting. But I think that as someone who's really invested in what it's called, I thought I need to really temper myself to maybe get my head around this idea of, I may not be 100% happy with the answer, but there's a bigger picture. If we can agree something, then it gives it a momentum that we wouldn't get if we're all just kind of with our own little flag in the corner going, no, it's got to be this and it's got to be that. If we can, it gives it a sense of real, like a juggernaut feel about it, if we can call it. Because I was drawing on my experience, and I think you probably know the story of the Canada, where there was absolutely no definition at all, and so they all sat in a room and thrashed it out. I mean, that's a reduction of what the process was. I don't think they sat in a room and thrashed it out, but they drew together police and mental health and social care and families, and they said, we're not going to go anywhere until we've worked it out, which is, they started with the definition as where we're a bit down the line. And they came up with AFCA, which is aggression towards family caregivers in childhood and adolescent, which at the time I thought, oh, that doesn't, but more and more it's sort of growing on me. And it felt like it was just taking a totally different spin to it. But I'm excited. I am excited. So Scott,
in a sort of Northumberland sort of way.
Well, yeah, you know. Yeah. In a sort of where's pass me a pie sort of way. So we'll put the links for this. I mean, are you? What would you like to be? I mean, do you have a preference for a definition? Maybe that's too. Maybe I shouldn't ask you that. But would you be your? I
think
preference?
You probably shouldn't ask that. I think
that's unfair,
I'm hearing from different groups of people. Some people feel very closely tied to particular phraseology and feel that that's what it is, and I've tried to keep out of that battle. And people have really good reasons for why they feel what it is to do with. So I'm not even going to. So I'm going to point you to a different piece of research. So there was a piece of research that looked at the way that professionals conceptualize what's going on, and the way that they respond. And it's so much, how we think about things is so much to do with our own background and experience and our own training. And that impacts the sorts of language that we use and the way we think about what's happening, because we have a framework already in which to understand the world, understand behavior, and understand and offer a response based on what resources our agency has, if you like.
Yeah.
And so if you come from a domestic abuse background, say, or whether that's because you've experienced it or because you've been trained in the field and you're working in the field, the people coming to you will have had a particular experience because they've chosen to come to your agency already. So they're already defining something. And the responses, the training that you will have had and the experience you will have had with colleagues reinforcing that thing will support your view of this is what this is, and this is how we're going to understand it, and this is how we're going to respond to it. But if you've come from a youth justice background, perhaps you've worked all your life in perhaps in youth clubs, and then perhaps with youth offending teams, or you've grown up, you've kind of had that sort of background, that sort of training, you will think of young people's behavior in a different way. And you will have different resources to offer, and you will tweak them when you realize that this is a thing and you need to be responding a little bit differently, but it will still be from within that framework. And so you will think about that and give it a different name. And so there is an element in which all of us, to do with our background, will favour particular terminology or will favour particular interpretations. And we kind of can't get away from that, I guess. And I just and that is one of the things where perhaps we're just going to have to say, okay, we can't agree, but we'll shake hands and we'll move on, because actually we need to just put this behind us now and get on with doing the work.
Yeah. I'll have to have a word with myself, won't I? I think that's what you're saying. That was a very good social work way of telling me off, I felt. No, I'm just teasing.
No, I think that's true, actually, because Al has had a certain bee in his bonnet about the definition of this for quite a while.
But not just him. This is Scott. What I'm saying is not just him.
No,
and
I know.
I'm not having a go at him, but there's there's very different camps that are saying it is
absolutely.
this, it is this. Yeah,
absolutely. But I think that when I never really thought about the definition until Al and I spoke about it, and it's not that I have a preference particularly, but I do use something different to the CPV thing, because I do think that is quite harsh. Once, but you have to understand that this is the thing as well. I'm not saying people are right or wrong, because like I just think that it's the language that matters, really. And if we can come to some conclusion about what suits best for the thing. But I think that if you're somebody for definitions, then you need to look at the definition of each word to be able to work that through in your head. I've remembered what it was, but it wasn't. I think it was more of an observation about the fact that it's taken this long. Do you feel like this is this consultation is quite thorough in terms of what we're asking? I know it's only 3 pages. I know it's not long, but do you feel like it's been thought through because it's been touched so many times by so many different people? And then I'll shut up.
I think it's good that it's taken this long. I think, but for slightly different reasons to your saying. Right. So in my head, it's good that it's taken this long because I've done masses of thinking in that time, and I know that I've changed my understanding. And on a, I wouldn't say on a day-to-day basis, but year by year, I feel I'm learning more, and my attitudes, my views, my understanding is changing and growing. And so I might if I was starting again, I might use different phrases, different terminology, different letters now because of what I've learned and what I'm feeling. So I'm glad in that sense. If we'd done this 10 years ago, we might have come up with something very different, and we might now be saying, oh, we don't like that, we want to change it. So it's frustrating. It's been incredibly frustrating that we kept saying, every research document was, we must, number one, we need Home Office needs to consult on a definition and a terminology. But it's good that it's taken this long because it's given us a maturity in our thinking and in our understanding.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, on that note, I'm aware that those back episodes of Fantasy Island are not going to watch themselves, Helen Bonnick. Or Under Hammer. Helen, thank you so much for coming on. Really appreciate you giving your time.
She'll never come on again because she'll be so cheeky.
I won't now. I'm going to have to work out how many years it is now before I can come on again.
Although, a disruption in the space-time continuum. Thank you so much for your time. Wish you well. Have a great Christmas, and we'll speak to you soon.
Thank you very much for having me, and thank you for the opportunity to promote the consultation. Thank you.
Thank you, Helen.